have roll call, please?
Mr. Cranes?
Here.
Mrs. Medina?
Here.
Mrs. Rail? Here. Mrs. Head?
Here.
Mrs. Lee? Mr. Davis? Here. Mr. Bembo?
Here. Okay, thank you, Maureen. Next, we'll have our student representative report. Emily?
Okay, so Spread the Word to End the Word Day was held on March 5th, and that was sponsored by the Future Teachers Club. And solo and ensemble, there was a group of students that are advancing to state. Forensics, we had our district meet here on March 8th, and state is on April 11th, and there's a group of students going to state. All the sophomore and junior students are registered for classes next year. And it's hard to believe, but spring sports are starting this week.
Orange baseballs.
For student council, we're continuing working on our Hope Store project. We're working on our state conference projects that's in April. And we're electing new members at the beginning of April.
Sounds good.
What I had one thought. Class reunion 0, the parents, senior parents are working at class reunion 0. And I just want the senior parents to realize that there will be an email coming out to them next week, looking for their help.
Sounds good. It was a lot of fun last year. So. Thank you, Emily. Okay, next we have the minutes.
Okay, I would make a motion that the regular Board of Education meeting minutes of February 10th, 2014 be approved.
Okay, a motion is second to approve the regular Board of Education meeting minutes of February 10, 2014. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's it for the minutes. Next, do we have any comments from you?
None.
Okay, we'll move into committee reports. We'll start with business services. John?
Thank you, John. We started at 6 o'clock, and we had a fairly lengthy meeting for once. We had 8 consent agenda items, so I will ask right now, does anybody want any of those held out at this time? Other than the 2 that we tabled? We actually had 10, but we tabled 2. If not, I will start. The first item we had was 2014-15 food service meal prices. And again, this increase is mandated by the federal government. It's not by our choice that we increase the prices. We currently are increasing school breakfast prices to $1.25 for all grades and $1.85 for adults. We're increasing the school lunch prices, $1.95 for grades K through 5, $2.15 for grades 6 and 7, and $2.35 grades 8 through 12, and then for adults $3.10. The current federal standard is $2.65, so that's where the point is that you don't have to raise prices anymore, but we probably will not make ever catch up to that amount because that increases along, as Julie Breen says, it's kind of like a cat chasing its tail, it'll never get there. The next item again was a food service upgrade of software, and Julie Marie had tested different 2 different types of software, one from Empower, which is currently the one that we're using through the company. It's an upgrade to the company we're currently using, which is Mealtime. Yes. And then the second one that we used, we looked at software through Skyward, and the Skyward was actually a little more expensive and didn't have some of the features that the current software Mealtime uses. So we approved the software upgrade at a cost of $9,460 for the Empower software upgrade, and it's coming out of the Fund 50 budget. The next item we had was Windows operating system upgrade. Microsoft is no longer going to supply technology and patches for XP, so it left us a little choice. So what Technology Group did is they actually purchased 8.1 Pro licenses so that we can upgrade to those, although what they're actually purchasing right now is the Windows 7, because Windows 8 doesn't work very well with business and education software at this time until we get that patch fixed. The cost of that system was $11,718 and has to be funded from the district technology budget. The next item we had is D, which is the district computer replacement. Since we had to upgrade software. We also have to upgrade computers and processing power. So there was a motion and a second to purchase 133 computers from Bytespeed at a cost of $70,490, and that's to be funded from the district technology budget. Then we had another computer replacement for a computer lab that is used for CAD, graphic design, yeah, it was CAD, but graphic design. So we are upgrading those computers, and then the 30 that are there will be passed on to another part of the school district, as they won't be just thrown. So there was a motion and a second that we purchase 30 computers again from Bytespeed at a cost of $18,750, and that's to be funded from the Lincoln High School technology budget as well as the district technology budget. Then along with that, we have our district storage area network, or SAN, where all of the information is. And we had a 3-year contract for the maintenance and support. And again, we had and that expired this past year. So the upgrade for the new 3-year contract through Capital Data at a cost of $19,325.34 is funded through the district technology budget, and it was recommended for approval to the school board. This is a very needed contract because it covers a lot of parts and everything that for our 2 server systems, or storage systems, excuse me. The next item, we had not addressed driver education fees for the since last time we talked about them was 2010. So the recommendation is that we propose an increase to $325 per student beginning at the 2014 summer school program. Our previous cost was $310. The $325 does cover the cost that the school district puts into the program. And the last item we have is a building and ground supply bid. And every year we go through the supplies purchases. This year it was everything but floor waxes that they told us during the bid. And basically it's for the paper and supplies type of bid. And we had multiple vendors that were awarded. Ed puts the bid out, and it's a sealed bid. So the lowest vendor, or the lowest bid per group or per product is awarded to the vendor at the lowest price. And I believe all of the vendors were awarded at least some part of the bid. The 2 items we held out were new policies. Actually, one's a new. Were they both new policies?
One's new.
One's new. The second one, the first one's a correction. The second one's new. And what we did is we tabled those because there were some questions about the wording for students over 18, and we wanted to make sure the wording was correct before we brought it forward for first reading. So those will be brought through after next month. So I would make a motion to approve BS1 to BS8.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the 8 business service consent agenda items. Maureen, could you please have roll call vote?
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Hetz?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayon?
Yes.
Then we had an update, a purchase review, and we reviewed invoices for library material, and then and software purchases, and then virtual school curriculum purchases. With the 2 policies coming through next month, our only future agenda item right now is transportation negotiations, which should be progressing in the next month or 2. So with that, I recommend approval of the balance of the minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion is second to approve the business service committee meeting minutes of March 3rd, 2014. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you, John. Next, we can move on to the personnel services. Sandy?
Personnel Services met last Monday at March 3rd, and from that meeting, we have 5 consent agenda items, and they are as follows. The committee recommends, and I move to approve the following 5. 1, that we approve the 3 professional staff early retirement requests effective at the end of the 2013-14 school year. Secondly, we approve the 1 support staff early retirement request effective at the end of the 2013-14 school year. 3, that we approve the 1 professional staff resignation request effective the end of the 2013-14 school year. 4, that we approve the 3 support staff resignation requests. And finally, 5th, that we approve the 5 support staff appointments. Does anybody want anything held out?
I'll second that.
I just have a question. On the PS board, those dates given, is that the day that they effectively resigned on? Or is that the day that they submitted the resignation?
Let's see, those are the days that they were hired. No, effective, that's when it's effective, the
Okay.
23rd, 7th.
Thank you.
Okay, there was a motion and a second to approve PS1 through PS5. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And with that, I move that the minutes of the Personnel Services Committee meeting of March 3rd be approved as printed.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from Personnel Service Committee of March 3, 2014. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Sandy. Next, Ed Services. Mary's going to give the report tonight because Ann's not here.
Okay, thanks, John. Ed Services met on March 3rd for their regular meeting. There were 2 consent agenda items. Does anyone want either one of these held up? Okay, then the committee recommends, and I would move to approve ES1, which was the Constellation Grant, location and logo. Kathy Stebbins-Sins, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, passed the handout for the proposed location for the 2 to 4 kilowatt photovoltaic system at Lincoln High School. The handout also included the proposed logo for the system. She then introduced Rick Murden from Encourage Community Foundation. He has worked on this grant with Lincoln, Nakusa, Port Edwards, and Assumption High Schools, as well as the Mid-State Technical College Renewable Energy Facility. The grant was originally submitted for $50,000, of which $45,000 was granted, and each of the schools involved received $9,000 for this. Then ES2 was the Wisconsin Rapids Public Schools Strategic Plan. Colleen Dickman, our superintendent, reviewed updates and changes to the district strategic plan. She reviewed new steps, completed steps, and revised timelines. She also reviewed new objectives, which include Objective 3, to create an understanding and implement mapping of all curricular areas. Objective 5, ensure all WRPS students understand STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and have related curricular experiences and opportunities. And Objective 6, to implement the state-required educator effectiveness model to improve teacher practice and to implement the new teacher and administrator evaluation system. She indicated this plan is always a work in progress and many of the objectives are ongoing. I did make a motion.
Okay. Motion is second to approve ES1 and ES2. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Just updates on the course.
Yep, I see it right there. Okay, and then we also had updates on the course options. Kathy also reviewed the new course options program. Students enrolled in a public school can take up to 2 courses at any time from an educational institution. She indicated there are still a lot of questions regarding this program and why a student would opt to pursue this avenue rather than the youth options. This plan will replace part-time open enrollment and go into effect with the 2014-15 school year. She stated that further information will be gathered and a board policy will be written and brought to the board for approval. And with that, I make a motion to approve the Ed Services Committee report of March 3rd, 2014.
Second.
Okay, motion is second to approve the meeting minutes of the Ed Service Committee of March 3rd, 2014. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we will move on to agenda referrals and information requests. Sandy?
I'd like a review of policy 672 on purchasing. It's been a while since we looked at it. I don't know if we can update it, if it needs it, or streamlining, or something like that. And then secondly, there was some talk about a year or so back that the secondary level at summer school, we were going to look at some of the courses be for regular credit, so somebody could get ahead rather than just be remedial, and I just was wondering how that's coming along, if we have any classes like that for this coming summer school. And that's it.
Okay, anybody else have anything? Okay. those then. Next, we can go into our legislative agenda. See, we have Representative Krug here with us tonight. Thanks for coming, Scott.
No problem.
You didn't need a vote to get here, did you?
Almost. I live in Rome, so we have a 100-foot driveway that's full of plenty of water right now, so I got a little sunburn cleaning that out today. First of all, I wanted to thank you for your flexibility. As we were scheduled to meet in February, things were a little confused and in the mix in negotiations, and just didn't feel like it was an appropriate time to try to update you on things I just didn't know anything about. So first, I thank you for that flexibility. Today, things are settling a little bit more. We are down to the last week or so of session in Madison. The Senate will meet tomorrow, possibly one, maybe twice after that. The State Assembly will also meet next week for 2 session days. By the end of March, most, if not all, legislative business will be taken care of, and we will move on to the next session and things outside the building. Right now, the big things that were happening in the last week or two, obviously, I'm sure everybody's heard of, the Common Core discussion, the accountability discussion, some of the other things we can talk about a little bit more tonight, but I wanted to start with those two, give you a chance to ask some questions after I gave a little update on where we're at with those. As far as the Common Core bill, as it's referred to, Assembly Bill 617, there's a little bit of confusion between the chambers on which way we should go with that. I think the Assembly and Representative Thiesfeld feel that we should go a little further than the Senate feels they should go. So I would direct my comments to what the Assembly substitute amendment on AB 617 would do. As you know, in the state budget, there was a pump the brakes motion put into the state budget saying if we haven't gotten to the part of implementing Common Core in certain subjects, so let's just hold off on implementing those until we can review the process. Some conversation in Madison and around the rest of the state revolved around should we just let the Department of Public Instruction have all the say, or should the legislature have a say as well? So that's the crux of the argument. Like I said, in the budget, we put the brakes on some of the things that hadn't been implemented yet. Not saying that school districts at any time can't keep going with what they're doing in those other subjects, but that's what brought this secondary bill on AB 617. In the substitute amendment, it states that we're going to look to create a model academic standards board, something to give more accountability to the process of instituting statewide standards. The board would review English, reading, and language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. Science and social studies being the core subjects that have not been introduced statewide as yet. For the subjects that have been introduced, they're looking in English, reading, and language arts, and mathematics. Within 12 months of any bill being passed, a full review of those core subjects coming to the Model Academic Standards Board for full review. The composition of the board is also in the substitute amendment, describing who is going to be on the board, who will be appointed by whom. But the major crux of this is that the legislature and the Joint Committee on Rules Review would like to have some input on a standards plan adopted by DPI. Once that plan is brought forth, DPI will review the plan, the superintendent will make recommendations, you'll have to go to the JCRAR, as it's called, the review committee, the rules review committee, for approval of those standards. If JCRAR does approve those standards, it moves on to the legislature. If JCRAR does not approve those standards, they still have to submit a bill to the full legislature incorporating the recommendations from the Department of Public Instruction on the standards. That's where the question comes in. Some say that once it goes to the legislature, any bill introduced by the Committee on Rules Review could be adopted or could be changed, thus putting the hands of the legislature into the process of creating standards. Obviously, that's where the big argument comes in, whether the legislature should have direct involvement in the standards or not. As it stands right now, I think it would be fair to say that the state Senate is not at all interested in putting this bill in front of their entire body. They have one senator who will be leaving on vacation after their session day tomorrow for the next 3 weeks. So the thought out in Madison is if this senator is gone, there aren't enough votes to pass anything controversial, they say. So I don't expect AB 617 passing in the state Senate. Having said that, know exactly where the state assembly would be on passing it with knowing that the Senate's not going to pass it. Most likely, the assembly probably would not take up a bill that they don't know is going to pass the state Senate. So I think it'll be back to the drawing board as we go into the next state budget, back into the drawing board for separate legislation to see where we should go with Common Core standards. The second part of that Common Core discussion, the Smarter Balance test, quite a point of contention within Common Core testing. The overriding thought is the Smarter Balance lines up very well with the Common Core standards. It should be implemented together if they're going to be implemented. The question remains whether we would still allow a Smarter Balanced standardized test to go along with any individual standards that any school districts would implement, knowing that we'd still like to have testing going on regardless of whatever standards any school board adopts. So that is still the question that still I don't think has been answered completely as to what our testing situation would look like if we allowed everybody to have individual standards. And obviously something that we invested a lot of time and energy in is creating the report card system and creating accountability. So they're all very well tied together. I think the third part of the accountability issue comes to where choice, charter, voucher schools, whichever you want to refer to, where they all fit into the discussion. The state Senate did pass an accountability bill that states that all schools receiving public dollars will receive a public report card where it'll be open for everybody to review their academic success and failures. The state assembly is in disagreement with that position, thinking it should go further, that yes, we should have accountability for all schools, but after a certain point, if you find a failing school that has repeated its failure year after year after year, having a procedure put in place to step in to try to help correct the situation. So that's where accountability is differing between the two chambers. I don't necessarily think the state assembly would be inclined to take up the Senate's position of just putting in report cards. I think the assembly would be more interested in finding solutions to continually failing schools. So we'll see where that plays out. That's where I think the best summary of Common Core academic achievement and analysis comes from. I'd be certainly open to any questions before I move on to any other subjects.
What knowledge do the legislatures themselves bring to making decisions about educational issues? And why should we believe what they want when we're doing it pretty well the way it is?
Well, and that's a good question. Every different legislator comes from different backgrounds. Every different legislator has their expertises that they spend a lot more time and have life experience in. No, not every legislator is a educational expert by any means.
I don't know if they have to be, but why do they think that they should have this influence?
I think, when you get back to the role of government, I think the way the Wisconsin Constitution is set up is we have a judicial, legislative, and executive branch, but we also have part two of the executive branch. We have the governor and we have DPI, and they both have very broad executive powers. So I think what you're seeing right now is the legislative process going through the legislature, being overviewed by the courts, being looked by the governor's office, but nothing legislatively really computes with what's going on with DPI. DPI gets its own rules, understanding, and input. I think the issues that I've received from constituents say, I'm glad we get to vote for the DPI superintendent, but what more input do we have besides that election? And they think that the legislators are more directly responsible to their points of view than the DPI superintendent. That's where the crux of the argument comes in.
Do you support AB 617, giving the final say with the assembly and the legislators?
I think there is I still have some issues with the JCRAR component of it. In theory, I would love to see a model academic standard board. I don't think this bill, as they call it, is quite soup yet, though, where it's a good mix. I think finding a good, we've done it the whole session long in the assembly. We reviewed rules from every bureaucrat that's in Madison. Every standing committee in the assembly has reviewed every rule that's out there. So I think we do need to have a review and have some say in that academic standards, but I don't think necessarily saying, okay, DPI superintendent, you don't like this, we're going to go rewrite it completely and take it to the legislature for a vote. I think if we have that review, we can have JCRAR have public hearings and just give it to the legislature without JCRAR creating new rules. If DPI superintendent has a package and wants to bring it to the legislature for approval, let it come to the full legislature for approval. Don't let a committee decide what the full legislature is going to do, because I don't see much difference between just the DPI deciding and just JCRAR deciding. I think if it's going to come to the legislature, let it come to the full legislature.
So then you would vote no against 617, if it were to come to a vote?
If it would come to the vote as it is, I would vote no.
Okay.
The JCRAR component isn't where I want it to be yet.
You're talking about a model academic standards boards, and I know there's a lot of discussion on how it would be appointed. What is that right now? How is it looking?
In the substitute amendment, it basically states, I can read it off to you here, I don't have it memorized. The model academic standard board would be comprised of the following members: the state superintendent of public instruction or his designee, who would be the chairperson, and who would also appoint 4 members. There would be 6 members appointed by the governor, one of whom would serve as the co-chairperson, and 1 member appointed by each of the Senate majority and minority leaders, 1 member appointed by the assembly leader, and 1 appointment by the assembly minority leader. So you have a mix of legislators, executives from the governor's office, executives from DPI, senators, assemblymen. But the members appointed by the governor must also include 1 teacher employed by a public school, 1 teacher employed by a private school participating in the parental choice program, 1 superintendent of a school district, and 1 individual employed as a principal in an elementary school, and 1 individual who is the parent of a pupil attending a private school under the choice program. No member of the board. Oh, that was it. That's the end of that. So even the governor's appointments are limited by statute as who he can choose for an appointment as well.
Could I just ask a question to piggyback off that? Do you know what the thinking is? I mean, I'm looking at that, and when I read that, I thought, doesn't it make more sense, because the DPI is the education body, who has hopefully some expertise in education. Why would they not be appointing 6 versus the governor? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
DPI
That's how-
is appointing 4 and the governor's appointing 6. And I'm looking at it going, I mean, I know the governor's appointing like educators, but.
And that's what I think the balance comes in, is that
But wouldn't the
DPI
DPI
can appoint
be-
4 individuals across whatever continuum they want to appoint from. The governor's appointments are limited. So I think maybe that's where the balance would come in, is that the governor has to choose from certain categories, whereas DPI can just pick whoever they would like. That's what happens to some legislation. Some people who come up with arbitrary numbers and just try to fill them in and say, okay, this is where we're going to go. You could argue all day on 3 or 5 or 4 or 6 or whichever way it's going to go. Every legislator would have a different opinion.
I just find it very troubling when we're looking at things concerning education like this and curriculum being held in the hands of legislators, because it was a couple years back when the other party was in power that just like that, it was mandated that we teach the history of labor unions.
Yep.
And we had to do, curriculum changes and put that in, and there was no money that followed that. So I would assume history would repeat itself, and who knows what could come down the pipeline.
No, that's true. I still think, in the end, though, I think it's a fair, equitable, open process to have more than just a single entity reviewing academic standards.
I could see a model, board, but I have a great qualms about the makeup of that board. I think it should be mostly educators. I mean, that's their expertise. I saw something in the magazine that said, those that can teach, those that can't make laws regarding teaching. I think that's what's going on in Madison.
I have taught, actually, just by the way. Go ahead.
I guess I had a couple things. One is that, my concern is, and it's talked about, is that it's got to be a nonpartisan, education should be nonpartisan. And that's the thing that scares me, is that, 2010 Common Core standards were accepted by the state. There's a lot of money the state and every school district in this state has put into these Common Core standards to get them going. They're not made by DPI. They were made by the whole country to mirror the world in what China and Japan and them people are doing over there to try to get everybody on the same page. So the concept is good. The things that bother me is that they were saying that, well, the people in Wisconsin haven't had a say. Well, a lot of this money is PAC dollars, and the influence is coming from out of state, which bothers me. There's a lot of people in Wisconsin that aren't involved with this Common Core thing, but a lot of people in Madison, and you know that, there's PAC dollars and money coming in from outside that are people, groups that are against the Common Core standard, and they're now attacking Madison legislators and throwing money at them to vote, sway their votes. That's partisan. We can't have a partisan system that where the, whatever its governor is at the time, Republican, Democrat, or whatever, making these policies for education. That's frightening to me.
Just to be fair though, John, I mean, if you look to New York, Governor Cuomo, who's definitely no, right-wing conservative, is doing the same exact thing right now. Say, hold on, we can develop New York standards. We don't necessarily need, the rest of the country's standards being our standards. Indiana's done the same. Obviously, it's a Republican governor though too. Indiana's program basically has done the same thing. Set up a model academic standards board. Let's have a review. Nobody's saying in any part of these arguments, and it's currently common knowledge right now. The current law is you can keep your standards if you like them. If we review them and you want to keep your standards, keep your standards. That's the bottom line that isn't being discussed in the media or portrayed in other sources, that you can still keep your standards.
But the whole purpose is to have everybody uniform, so that if a kid goes from Milwaukee to Superior, or from Superior to Eau Claire, or Eau Claire to Green Bay, they're all on the same page when they go from math class, AP Calculus to AP Calculus.
But even members who were on the Common Core Review Board nationally have had, it wasn't obviously an unanimous vote to adopt Common Core as a standard.
Sure.
I mean, there's some questions on whether Common Core is good enough. And I think if we do come up with a system where we have an academic standards review board, whether it's the JCRA process or whatever process, we can create Wisconsin standards that fit our kids better. I think that's what we should do.
I don't disagree with that.
But will you then be doing a test as well? Because if we don't follow your standards,
That's
we're
where the
not gonna pass
confusion
the
would come in
test.
a little bit too, is, if you have those individual standards across school districts, how do you, keep track for accountability purposes, individual standards and individual tests,
Well,
and
there's
how
a
are those
report
tests
card.
compared? And the report card system goes right out the window.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it needs more discussion. Obviously, like I said, my point of view is that we do need an academic standards review board. We've been pushing for more open government and more review of everything along the way. Is this the exact way we should go? I don't think it is right now.
And then the second part of my question is as far as for the voucher schools and that type of thing, where is it standing right now as far as all of these schools getting money, now there's Catholic schools, Lutheran schools getting public dollars? Where, is there legislation and accountability, part of the accountability where they now have to, if they're taking our public dollars, are they under the same open records laws? Have to provide the same information? They have to provide their books? So if I wanted to go over to Assumption and know exactly where the dollars are going that they're getting for voucher kids, that they have to supply the open records request just like we do.
I would have to check on open records, but I know that there's a bill up in the state Senate tomorrow that does increase accountability and openness as far as reviewing standards, reviewing progress, accreditation, things to that nature. And as you go through, some of those groups that you talked about earlier, talking about accountability standards that are in place for voucher schools, there's administrative standards, financial standards, academic standards, they're all in place. It's not talked about as well as often, but those standards do exist. It's something that I think we're trying to strengthen with our accountability bill that's been fought over tooth and nail, even within the Republican caucus, trying to figure out which way to go with it. I think, honestly, again, a fair assessment of voucher schools and choice schools and any public dollars going to any public school, there has to, at minimum, be the report card system in place, along with the other standards that already exist. As far as some of the open record stuff, I think, off the top of my head, I think there's mechanisms in place, and if not, we can look at that too. But that's the only way that system is ever going to be credible in the eyes of the overall public as a whole, is to say, okay, I can compare public school to private school, both gain tax dollars, which one is performing, which one isn't. Right now, I don't think that exists. I think that's what our goal is this session.
Is there any discussion as that voucher program grows, that the private schools will then be responsible for paying for their transportation? To give
And that's the
us
discussion
some
we have.
relief?
Right, that's the discussion we have with charter schools too. Is there's no transportation requirement for charter schools who are, not instrumentality schools. And I don't think I've heard any discussion about, making that transportation mandate the same.
I know we've had many discussions, and I guess what I've heard loud and clear is keep the playing field level. We don't have money to provide advertising during a Super Bowl. We can't do that. Private schools can. So it's not a level playing field. So if they're gonna take tax dollars, and we talk about open and transparent government, it has to be open and transparent for all, not just.
Yeah, I think, one of the glaring examples of what can happen in the system right now, there was obviously a voucher school in Milwaukee. Open one day, close the next. Ouch, what do you do now? I think if some of the things we're talking about finishing up this session were in place, you wouldn't have a situation like that. And that's not a situation that anybody in any of these programs wants to see, whether it's private or public. Nobody wants to see kids.
Well, we only get one chance to educate the youth.
Right.
And if we mess up, they're the ones that suffer.
Yeah, and I think that's what
ultimately, the whole society suffers.
And I think that's what takes me back to, overall funding issues and overall accountability and overall standards. Yeah, we do only have one chance. By the time my kids go from kindergarten, into the junior high system, if we even had this review process in place for the standards review, each of those subjects will only be reviewed once every 6 years. So that means my kid gets one crack at any review of any system that's out there for them. Is that good enough for our kids to say, okay, we have a system in place, let's just push you through, and then by the time the next group comes in, maybe we'll review it once more? And that's the problem that's out there.
But there's not a concern that the doors here will close tomorrow. The voucher school could. So, tax dollars are supporting public education. It's a dangerous road to go down when you start supporting private education.
Well, and that's true. But again, when you're talking the property taxpayer as a whole, making that investment in their education for their children, whether it goes directly from them directly to the school, I still am going to hold the position saying, okay, if I'm paying my property tax bill and I'm paying the majority of it towards my kid's education, I should have a choice. I should be able to decide that I don't have to spend my whole paycheck at Walmart. I should be able to decide if I can spend some of it at Shopko. I mean, that's part of the decision. And yeah, there's some accountability things. There's some different measures that can be beefed up or improved.
Are there any non-Christian schools that you know of that are voucher schools?
I would have to look at the list. I would imagine it'd probably be more of an option in Milwaukee or Madison than it would be anywhere else with the program right now. There could be. And I don't know exactly off the top of my head.
That was then my last question is how does, I guess I'm confused how we can use public dollars and yet still have to have the separation of church and state.
Well, the separation of church and state, when you go back to the way the Constitution is written, is saying that Congress shall pass no law abridging. I mean, you can definitely blur those lines a little bit by saying you can go to a private school. What you can't do is have Congress saying you can't worship in the public square. I mean, I think when we talk about the intent and the language of the Constitution and separation of church and state, I think that's gotten blurred over the years to say there should be no involvement between the two entities. And I think that's a misinterpretation.
Wasn't the original rationale for the voucher schools was to be aimed at failing districts? For example, it was in Milwaukee and Racine, and they were looking at expanding it to 3 cities, Appleton, Madison, and Green Bay. And that was it, 3 cities. And the snap of the fingers, it became statewide.
Right.
And it was not for failing schools, it was just for anybody that needed it. And 77% of the kids that this year enrolled in voucher schools were already in private schools.
Right.
Do you think we can support public education, voucher schools, and independent charter schools? Can the state afford to support 3 different types of education and do it adequately?
Absolutely. I think when you go back and look at the overall budget from 2009 to 2011, 2013, and if you separate out federal stimulus dollars, the state's currently spending more money in K-12 public education than it did in 2009. State dollars, GPR dollars. And we still have the independent charter school system, and we still have the voucher school system. So those dollars are there. When you get down to separating out the federal stimulus dollars, there was $12.1 billion of state GPR spent in 2009. Right now in the 13-15 budget, there's $12.4 billion spent on public education, K-12. So I think, obviously the money's there. I think it's something that we...
But then, last year we cut $2+ million from our budget. This year, we're looking at another $2+ million from our budget. And this has been going on for, I would say, minimally 10 years. You know, we have the declining enrollment.
And that's part of the problem, is, you know, you can't obviously look at keeping budgets in place if you have less students to teach.
Right, and we've closed schools. But, you know, if you lose 20 students, or you lose 30 students, and you've got 8 elementary, you know, schools, and you lose a couple here, a couple there, a couple there, you can't just willy-nilly close a school because they're not all concentrated.
But you can see, there was even an article today in, I think it was Wisconsin State Journal, that was quoting the Marshfield News Herald, where a lot of rural school districts in central Wisconsin are starting to see increase in enrollments. It may have not reached Wisconsin Rapids yet. You see Marshfield, you see Abbotsford, you see some of those areas in northwest Wood County and Clark County where you see increase in enrollments, and they attribute it to the growing population of Latinos. We have the same situation in Tri-County area. We have the same situation in the Almond Bancroft School District, where you see enrollments starting to come back. You can't always say that you're always going to have declining enrollments, and yes, you do have to make tough choices from each budget to each budget as far as how many kids are here now, how many teachers can we keep on for this many kids, how many buildings can we keep open all the time. But enrollment's going to keep fluctuating. And even with the current system we just put in place with the statewide voucher system, is that 3-year rolling average is going to keep those kids on your rolls for the next 2 years as they transition out to the private schools. So you're still seeing those dollars from those 20 or 30 kids who went into the voucher program. I mean, you still will for the next budget, and your third budget will be the one where you have to start making decisions.
It catches up to you.
It may or may not.
And as far as, I lost my point.
I got one.
Go ahead.
So aren't you sorry you asked if there were any questions?
I would assume, Scott, you want the brightest and finest people to teach in Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
Okay. I have a niece that went to Germany with her husband about 5 years ago, about 4.5. First year, she and her husband, the first $80,000 of income was tax-free. She is about the best orchestra teacher Colorado ever saw. Now, she's going somewhere after this next 2-year stint in Germany. Would I bring her to Wisconsin with the kind of attitude that we have here? We're not going to bring those people here, because this is what's happened with Act 10. And that's why I'm against it, and I'm offended by people that think that it's fine and it's going to work. And if it's going to work, and it's not going to damage our educational system, let's study it and find out if it is. Let's find out if the finest and best are coming here. Would that be a prudent way to find out?
You know, I think you're going to see the cream rise to the top regardless of whatever situation they're in. And I think one of the things that we're working on with the Rural Schools Task Force is definitely looking at a process where we can keep the educators in rural districts longer, because we've seen it as a training ground to move on to bigger districts at points. And that's something that I don't know if we'll see any movement in the session or not, but the Rural School Task Force is really tackling those issues of populations of less than 50,000 to try to figure out some ways that rural schools can be addressed differently in the funding formula, in teacher effectiveness, in different categories, and setting up processes to say, okay, not every school district's the same. If we're not going to treat every education component the same, why are we treating every school district the same? We should let school districts have flexibility, remove some of the mandates that we're talking about. And it's been a constant point of discussion for legislators across the board to say, hey, if you have some mandates you're not in favor of, let me know. I'm glad that you don't want the state to tell you, hey, go and teach this subject because we told you to. I drafted a financial literacy component this session too, and I hesitated to introduce it, and I didn't, because I didn't want to push it on everybody to say you have to teach financial literacy. I think when you have that flexibility in place and you have some rural initiatives that'll keep teachers longer, I think the cream will rise to the top. I really do, and I don't think it's necessarily an endorsement of Act 10 by any means to say, now that we've given school districts and administrators the ability to find better ways to deal with their personnel, I think those personnel decisions are going to be less driven by outside entities and more driven by the folks sitting at this table who are elected to make those decisions.
Well, the decision we have to do is take more and more away. And that's not a good decision.
And it's not a great decision either for us to have to make either, but we're not definitely the first ones to make those decisions. Governor Doyle's last 2 budgets did the same exact thing. I mean, the money wasn't there at that point. and we were left with a hole that had to be filled in. Now the hole's being filled in. Now we're looking at developing new opportunities and new strategies across the board. Now that funding's coming back, are we looking at doing everything the way we did it before? No,
still
we're not.
cutting more than we did last year. When does this money start coming?
I don't, you know, and that's my challenge, is that when we do some of these initiatives, like the per pupil adjustments that we made, the $75 this year and the $150 the year after, it doesn't hit schools with declining enrollment. And that's the problem that we have to figure out, is how to find rural initiatives to help, you know, especially the Nakusa School District is a very, Adams Friendship School District, they're very property-rich, income-poor districts. That's the funding formula issue. It's not necessarily an Act 10 issue. It existed before Act 10, it's existing after Act 10. That has to be addressed. We have to figure out a way to quit punishing these school districts that have a lot of property.
You know, and you talk about the funding formula issue, and I'm thinking of that, and I'm looking at that, and I agree with what my fellow board members are saying. And, you know, I've been talking to my legislators, I've been going to WASB conventions, I've been on the board, this is my 14th year, and, you know, begging them to listen to us, that it needs to be changed, and I've been hearing from both sides of the aisle, at the seminars that we go to, individually when we talk to the legislators, you know, yep, we know it's not right, but we're not going to bring it up because it's not going to pass, because there's too many people in our district, it's not going to work. And I've heard that time and time again. So my fear is, my continued fear is, with Common Core, the same thing is going to happen. You're going to have the legislators, their own little things they're going to be picking on, and we're going to be in the same mess for 10, 15 years down the road. And my grandchildren, who are 3, 4, 7, 10, by the time they graduate from high school, we're going to still be dealing with this. We have good educators. We have the Common Core. John said, you know, we spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of staff time, and we wonder why staff feels like they do. It isn't just the money.
No, I know, and nobody's saying that even if we did pass this, you know, Common Core bill, that Common Core would go away, and we've described that.
I don't think it has to go away. That is the issue.
And that's fine, and if you don't, you can keep that. But to say that nobody should be able to make those decisions as individual elected school board members, I think is a false premise to stand on. Is that elected school board members should be able to make that decision instead of having the state come down and say, hey, guess what, you're taking Common Core. And it goes back to, I mean, Sandy said it before about that one mandate. It's a big mandate, and yes, you did have to spend a lot of money on it and a lot of time on it, but it's still a mandate. Saying, here, these are the standards, you don't have to do your own, we've got it prepackaged for you, and it's going to fit every student in your district. It's a false argument, I think. So.
Even though, I mean, you're saying about the Act 10 that basically it's not the fault right now of the governor, and you're saying about that the money, you know, that's not, even if the money's not the issue, I'm with Mary on that. The morale that it has caused, the lack of morale that it has caused in our district, and I think throughout the state, is just as important as the financial implications that it's caused.
That's
and
true.
I think that's what's not being heard.
No, and I think the bigger point on that issue is that morale is driven by facts, and I mean, we have to.
It's driven by treatment.
But your treatment is, the treatment of your employees is based on the facts that you can deal with and the facts that you can portray back to your employees. I think when we see that, where people said a lot of employees left because of Act 10, a lot of employees left because they were scared about what Act 10 might do. A lot of employees made that choice on their own to leave, to retire, to take what they could at the time they thought it was going to be the best for them. It wasn't anything that Act 10 made anybody do. A lot of choices were made. People decided, okay, that's it for me. That's a choice that somebody made. And it goes back.
Good people left when they didn't need to leave.
And I think a lot of good people left before they could see that it wasn't necessarily the end of the game for them too. And I think that's a fair statement to say. You can't sit here and say that everything that's happened is absolutely terrible.
Well,
you learn that absolutes don't exist in this life.
You have to legitimize their feelings, for gosh sakes. That's how they feel.
And you can, and I
If
think
you're not asking them, then you don't know.
And I think that's the biggest point that came out of Act 10, besides the financial point, is that you were able to decide how your employees would be treated and how to approach your employees through your
There were some
handbook
advantages to
processes.
that.
And that's where morale comes from, is your ability to make those decisions now.
Not many advantages.
What's going on with the voucher and special education? Where is that right now?
Special ed.
Special ed voucher and charters?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that that's not going to come up this session. I know there was some discussion late January, early February is gonna come back. There's nothing on on my radar anyways. I haven't seen any bills coming up
But
saying.
when
it's
they
been-
talked about it in the past, they were talking about it being some sufficient, were they not?
I didn't spend a lot of time on it. I don't know exactly where it was or where it was going to go. I wish I could give you more, I could get back to you about it though.
Well, I mean, some sufficient was whatever it cost to educate that student, you would get that money off the top.
That was the general principle, but I don't know exactly.
Even though we in the public schools struggle to provide the very best we can for our special education kids, and it's very, very expensive.
Again, I don't think anybody was going to make a huge rush out of your doors if that bill passed. I think there might have been a few families here and there that would have made the decision to go elsewhere, but I don't think it would have been a mad exodus outside of your buildings.
When we talk about the religious voucher schools and providing public money now, when we first did 4K kindergarten, we have churches here that took 4K into their buildings, but they were not allowed to teach education. That was religion, I mean.
That makes it so much easier.
That'll haunt me. They were not allowed to teach religion. Can that be changed now that we're subsidizing religious schools now? Is that something they could do? I know some didn't even apply because they wouldn't give up that right, and some gave up that right, and they are still in our 4K program.
I don't see it being out of the realm of possibility that could happen. I don't, again, I haven't spent a lot of time dealing with 4K issues and things like that far deep, but I don't see anything right now saying that there can't be some component or, even in our schools, our K-12 schools, there's still some components of religion. There's still some components of a deity and creationism, and it all exists in some form or another in every school district. I don't know. The best honest answer is...
Well, there's teaching about religion and teaching a religion. I mean, that's...
You're right,
a
but
big-
it's still, and it goes back to that separation. I mean, the separation isn't absolute right now, so I don't see it being absolute at the end of the session.
As far as it's been talked about now, is there actually anybody looking at the funding formula in the legislature?
There are, and that's the problem that we've seen right now is that, I think Mary mentioned it before, is that every different legislator who has their own different districts to represent, I would be very much more interested in a certain fashion of a funding formula as opposed to somebody from Appleton or Milwaukee or Green Bay. Everybody's...
The schools down by Milwaukee, because you're right.
Yeah.
And here's the issue, just so that people understand. Funding formula, say we're getting $6,000 a student, there's school districts down there getting $10,000 and $11,000 a student.
Right, yeah.
And that's the problem, that's wrong. And then you got the rural districts, like you said, Tomahawk and Minocqua, where they're land rich.
Yeah, some of those districts are getting barely anything.
Barely anything because, and then most of them are state forests, then they get no tax dollars. So those are the issues that are so unequal in the funding formula that people don't realize that Tomahawk's one of them because they have so much state forest and state and federal land around them where they get no money.
Yeah, it was a big issue of mine when I first ran my first time, because I wanted to address the funding formula. But as you get into that time and you get to see everybody's protectionism over their districts, I don't want my district to lose anything. I don't want your district to get more. Mine's going to lose
But the bottom line is
anything.
it's still got to be looked at to make it equitable. That's the whole problem that every school board basically that we talk about is being equitable. There are some districts down there that they don't get any money either because they have so much tax dollars.
Right.
They don't get, even though they say they're supposed to get 11,000, they get nothing because of the 3 tiers. And then the second part, you're talking about mandates. The most important mandate you can change for us is school start date.
Yeah, it's...
That is so ridiculous that we
I had
have
two
to-
very small piles at the bottom I didn't think I'd get to.
Have to
School
be
start date
dictated
and 180
when we
days
start
mandate
school.
are two things that are coming up right now. The 180 days bill, I think, might actually see the light of day at some point. I haven't spent a lot of time reading it yet, but it's going to give more flexibility as far as your hours, your days, your operating procedures. The school start date one, that's been a very controversial issue, obviously, trying to figure out, again, for those districts up north, or the ones that are more tourist-based, saying, hey, why are we sending kids back when you guys want them in August? Why can't we just keep them until after Labor Day? Because we have the families here spending those dollars that we don't get from anything else ever. A good point right now would be the ice caves up by Bayfield. They're finally drawing tens of 15s and thousands of people. There's summer spots in the state that only draw those tourists from certain times of years too that say, hey, if we don't get these dollars this time of year, what do we do? And that's where the contention comes
The
from.
problem with Batesville is most of the time you can't get there because it's not frozen.
So I know, and it brought up a good point that I wanted to make, is that, if they didn't have the ice caves there, they didn't even have, they didn't have budgets right now to even plow the roads.
But that would still be, that would give those counties, and the two counties that they always refer to are Door County and then the Dells area, and most of those people use foreign workers and college kids. They don't use high school kids, other than after those kids leave. So that still gives them their flexibility. If that district certainly wants to start after Labor Day, fine, they can do that. But why should the rest of the state have to? Why should we in Wood County have to wait till September after Labor Day to start because somebody in Door County wants to keep a kid there for 2 weeks?
Yeah, no, it's a flexibility issue, and obviously I would like to give you as much flexibility as I can. Gary Bynes actually introduced that bill this session, and as soon as it was introduced, it kind of went down the drain. It never got any legs either side of the aisle, to be honest with you. But yeah, some things we can work on, that one I don't see happening anytime soon.
That's a very important one for a lot of districts, especially since you're starting football August 15th.
Yeah, I know. My son
Yeah.
started football practice July 27th last year in Auburndale. I mean, I know where you're going.
Yeah, I'm talking about games August 15th. So we have to start in July, but now you can't start school until September 1st, or 4th, or whatever it is, depending on the day.
Any other questions I want to, any other categories? I don't really have much more presentation besides those two. I figured they would drive the whole thing. Obviously, for more information for anybody in the audience or watching wherever, one of the best tools that a legislator has, and I would hope that school board members also utilize, obviously the State Fiscal Bureau has more information than anybody could ever want on education policy, finances, and things to the such. My office is always available to answer any questions, to be a go-between between any agency for any questions that you may have also. Obviously, the next session, we're going to talk a lot more about charter schools. We saw a bill come and go that we mentioned a few times about authorizing charter schools and who would be able to do such a thing. Voucher schools, I think we've kind of, my gut feeling is we've seen the expansion go to where it's going to go for the next 4 to 6 years. I don't see much bigger expansion plans in the next state budget. It was a tough budget in that issue already. Funding is always going to be an issue. Revenue limits are always going to be an issue.
Could you speak to charters? Just last year there was that bill, and I think when you were here we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
The funding, and I'm talking charter schools that are sponsored by a school district that are instrumentality or part of the district. And there was some discussion about funding those differently than non-charters.
Yeah, and
is there anything?
and there's
And I'm not
something-
hearing anything about charter schools.
No,
so-
it's been a very quiet issue lately. I know after the state budget that we talked about, where we were trying to figure out some differences between instrumentality and 2R funding, things have really quieted down. But I don't expect it to stay quiet very long in that front. I would expect to see some action in the budget.
This session yet, or?
Next session.
Next
Right.
session.
I don't think you'll see anything charter school related this session yet. I could be wrong. It is the end of the session and things go pretty quick and come up kind of quick sometimes too, though, so.
I just want to say, if I came across strong, I'm a strong believer in public education. I think we have to stand up for public education. I am terrified for the future of public education with all these other things taking away from it. And I guess I'm just, very passionate about public education, and I believe in it strongly, and I think we should all stand up for public education, because that's why we're on this board.
I agree. I totally agree. my wife and I have 5 kids, all in public schools. I mean, from the beginning to the end. That's where they went. That's where they'll stay. We're heavily invested in our school districts between 2 of our kids who go to Auburndale and the 3 that go to Nakusa. I'm there too. And I think the bigger point I want to bring back to my boards across my district is, there are some things I absolutely agree with 100%, that one size does not fit all for everyone at all times. But there are some things, even within my own caucus, that I don't agree with. The bigger point is I'm one legislator out of 99. And I can take your concerns back to the other legislators and discuss them, but I don't have a magic wand. And I wish I did sometimes, but I don't. The best I can do is give you honest, open answers and give you all the information I can possibly give you. And I really appreciate your time tonight.
Mr. Krug, I'd like to thank you for coming in, meeting with us. I'm sure it's a little uncomfortable sometimes that we grill you.
You get more used to it, you wouldn't believe it.
I hope that you've heard our concerns. They're legitimate. in our opinion, these concerns are very legitimate, and I appreciate you coming in and the work you do for us, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, next we'll move on to bills.
And thanks for the support on Skyward.
Yeah,
That was-
we didn't mention that, didn't we? I know, right?
I agree. Okay, I would make a motion that the bills be noted and, the receipts be noted. The bills be noted and the receipts be noted, and the bills be paid.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that the receipts be noted and bills be paid as printed in our packets. Please have roll call, Marie.
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayo?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Crean?
Yes. Thank you, Maureen.
I just want to note that there was $900 in energy rebate on the steamers at Rams, which I think, it's just like, wow.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed.
Jumps right out at you.
Okay, we'll move into new business. Item A, discussion and possible action regarding health retirement benefits for professional staff.
I'm going to just kind of give you an overview, and then Ryan and Dan will turn on the mic. I can see they're already actively getting ready to pipe in. Last month, we brought forward a possible change to the retiree benefit, and that was that retirees going forward, not this current year, but retirees going forward would pay a full deductible in the retirement years and not have access to the HRA in retirement. In other words, the HRA would not cover the deductible, not the premiums, if I said that, I meant deductible. We have a $2,000, $4,000 deductible plan, and retirees would be asked to pay the full amount. It would produce a savings of about, we gave you $15,300. We estimated 5 retirees this year, and we were calculating 4 having a family, 1 having a single, and it was about $15,300. So that was tabled at our last meeting. And so we took the idea, back with us, and we kind of put it on the back burner for the current time. In the last couple of weeks, we've met with several vendors, I think 4 or so, to discuss a different retirement option. It was actually something that I caught wind of at our WASB convention this January. And essentially, we want to come up with something that's legal, first of all, that's always good, something that's beneficial to employees and something that's sustainable. We know that the Affordable Care Act is going to affect how we offer benefits and what we can offer to retirees, and so we're trying to do some planning ahead of time. It's also a budgetary issue. We know that what we do right now, we probably can't sustain forever, given the lack of funding. Anyway, we want to move forward in a direction, and we have to consider the Affordable Care Act. We have to consider discriminatory testing. The rules for that under the Affordable Care Act have not come out, and we don't anticipate those coming out until about 2015. And then generally they give you some time, say 6 months or whatever, to fix whatever you've got that might be discriminatory, if there is such a thing.
How would it be discriminatory?
If the benefits are better for one group than the other, or different. If somebody has, as an active employee, they pay 100% of my premium and they pay 50% of yours, that would be considered discriminatory. And there's a whole variety of things, but we don't know about retirement benefits yet. Those rules have not yet been written, and we don't know that retirement benefits will be found discriminatory. But we don't want to wait around and have it plopped in our laps and not have a plan, should they be. We also don't know what the biennium budget is going to be. We don't know if we're going to get cut further for whatever reason. And we also have premium renewals every year for active employees, and those aren't getting any smaller. So with those things in mind, a concept we've been spending considerable time with is a retiree-only, premium-only HRA. And it's basically a defined contribution. It's, in other words, a fixed dollar amount on behalf of the employee when they retire, and that's similar to what you've already done. With the professional staff, the teachers, you pay 85% of whatever that dollar amount, whatever that premium is right now, and then that amount stays steady. That's similar to what this would be. In other words, you would decide on a dollar amount that would go into an account each year of retirement, and it would be similar to now. They have to be here 15 years working, 57 years of age. And this isn't proposed, I'm just saying this is likely what it could look like, that you would put dollars in if they were out for 8 years. You know, if they went to 57, you would put dollars in for each of those 8 years up to Medicare eligibility, not to exceed the 8 years, just like you do now. But the amount would go into, and it would be capped, so let's say 85% is, I don't know, 14,000. Well, let's make it easy, let's make it 10,000, let's say 85% maybe is the number you decide, we're gonna still pay 85%, that's 10,000, you know, a year. So what you do is you end up putting 10,000 a year into this HRA. It is, what do I want to say, it's monitored by somebody else, it's administered by somebody else. The district itself does not administer it. And
We
what
have to pay for the administration?
Yes, and that's generally, it can be anywhere from $2 a month for an employee, so $24 a year. We've seen rates of $6, so it really varies on who your vendor might be. The amount would be capped, and it would go into this account. The difference is that, again, it would be administered by a vendor, and the individual would use those dollars to pay premiums. The retiree would no longer be on our retirement plan. That's a huge difference. In other words, they would go out and shop for their own retirement health plan. And they could use the dollars to pay premiums. Now, they could use the dollars to pay premiums for dental. They could use the dollars to pay premiums for health. Right now, we just simply pay a portion of a health care premium. We don't pay for dental or vision or anything of that nature. They could also use it to pay a Medicare supplement, depending on when they retire. The retiree no longer being on our plan, but instead shopping, could be viewed as a positive by some, could also be viewed as a negative by others, depending on what your situation is. If I'm somebody who's in relatively good health and I don't want to buy the most expensive plan, I don't have to. Having the retirees off of our plan could affect the premium renewal for active employees. In other words, if there's high utilization in our retiree group, if they're no longer on, the current retirees would stay, but any retirees going forward is what we're talking about. And again, this is a concept. The dollars are there until the employee uses them up. So for example, if I have a spouse who has health insurance through his work, and he retires and he happens to have some retiree health insurance, we could use his, and I don't have to touch my HRA dollars until maybe his are used up, and then I can stretch the ones that I might have in that, you know, that you've put in there for those 8 years. I can stretch those out beyond just 8 years of premium or hitting Medicare, and I could use them to pay part of the supplement for Medicare. Currently, the plan is not, such a plan is not subject to discrimination testing, but that's currently. That may change when the rules come down, and we can't predict that. It's tax-free, it's used for, again, premiums only. It can earn interest. We're also looking at something, not just for retirees, but eventually looking at active employees, and what are we going to do for them? And I'll get to that in a minute. If the individual is rehired and becomes eligible for benefit, then the money is just suspended and it cannot be accessed for premiums. Just for that information. Because it's tax-free, it also doesn't allow for an additional premium tax credit. In other words, you cannot shop these are kind of the downsides, you can't shop the exchange. Now you can go to WEA and you can say, well, do you have a single plan? Or you can go to Security Health, do you have a single plan? You know, what does it cost? What are the different plans I can maybe have access to? And there are those out there. I don't have dollars, I don't have plans for you to tell you what they cost or what they might be. A couple other things. As I said, this could be done with active employees. I don't want to confuse the discussion for tonight because we're simply talking retiree benefits. But for example, if we were to grandfather, for example, certain employees in to say, you know, if you have 15 years of experience as of 2015, this is the kind of plan we're going to do for you. If you have fewer years than that and you're an active employee, we're going to put money into an HRA plan for you along the way and say it's $1,000 a year. And when you're here 30 years, you've got 30,000 sitting in there that you walk off with and you can use for premiums on insurance. Of course, we don't know what premiums are going to be 30 years from now. We may not have premiums, we may have nationalized health care. I mean, it's hard to say what the situation is going to be. Who knows?
Congress yet.
What's that?
They're only going to be on Congress yet.
But the dollars, if we can do it as you go, as you're employed, those dollars that go into that HRA can also grow with interest. And so, potentially an employee could walk away with more than just what the board puts in there. But again, that's another conversation. Overall, we realize that we can't sustain what we're currently offering, but we want to do something that's beneficial to employees. As Larry said, we want to attract and retain good people. The salaries certainly aren't increasing, and so, to have a benefit that's attractive is certainly something to look at. But we want it to be fair to the degree we can make it fair and certainly sustainable. We also realize we could set up a really good plan, have you approve it, and it could fall apart just due to funding that's available. Nothing can be guaranteed because we just don't know what our funding is going to be. And as much as I'd like to say, to all our teachers, we're going to guarantee, the next 10 years that we can sustain a particular plan, I don't know that that's realistic. I know that currently we still save dollars when someone retires. And if we replace them, I would say, what, about 32,000 maybe? We save per person who retires.
Because they're at the top of the schedule.
If we don't replace them, if somebody retires and we don't replace them, it's a bigger savings yet. So we're still in that place. We could sit and do nothing until it's no longer a savings. But I also know Affordable Care Act is hot and heavy coming at us, and we don't want to sit back and not be proactive. So, questions or comments, Dan and Ryan, if you have anything else to add?
I think you summed it up very well. I mean,
Summed, but there's a lot of information there. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm just going to say the operative terms here, themes are flexibility and ACA compliance, and I think those 2 points that you covered very well. There's increased flexibility with this plan on both the district side and the employee as well has more flexibility. They'll be able to go out and get their own plan on this model and not have to go with what the district provides. In some cases, an alternative approach may be better to employees, and we keep needing to change the design of our plan. John represents the board on our insurance committee. We just had a meeting a week ago. We're looking at some more design changes for the plan to try to get some savings. It becomes increasingly difficult to retrofit current retirees who have been retired 3, 4, 5 years into the new design every time we make a change. Under this model, they really would be able to take care of themselves and pick something and stick with something that may be better for them than what the group plan offers. On the district side of things, the flexibility need falls right in line with the Affordable Care Act compliance. Things are coming down that are going to be changing soon, and as Colleen has indicated, it could change from year to year, and we really need to be in a position where we can make adjustments, not only in our design, the plan design for our existing employees, but how this impacts retirees and what's available to them is only going to change as well as those rules and regulations adjust. The big one right now that we need to be prepared for is how that non-discrimination regulations work. It appears as though the practice we have right now will be deemed discriminatory, so we're going to have to change it anyway. The current guidelines indicate that this HRA premium-only plan is in accordance with what the guidelines are under ACA. So we would be in good shape, and our retirees would as well if we went with this arrangement. That's what we have right now as far as what the ACA says.
What we're looking for tonight would be, if you want to make a motion of some sort that would indicate agreement with such a concept, and that we continue to pursue it, that we get bids from the vendors we met with, that we would bring back a recommendation to you for a vendor, and then work with that person to put some numbers on paper. in other words, if you agree with, what we're considering, we could bring it back to you later this spring or early this summer for consideration. With that being said, we would keep retirement as it is this year, obviously. You could decide tonight that you want to keep it that way for next year as well, or if you want to wait and suggest that we kind of look at this, as a possibility. When we first started talking about this, we were looking at putting an 85% dollar amount into that HRA. But again, I can't guarantee anybody that money will be there in the spring, because I don't know what the biennium is going to be for us.
I attended the same, that session also, talking about the HRA.
Oh,
And the two advantages, basically, one is the compliance. That's going to be a big thing with the new Affordable Care Act. And one of the things they said, and that's the great thing about that Affordable Care Act, is that when it was written back in 2011, 2013 was never in the law until they added it. Well, now they got to the stuff for 2013, 2014. Now they're trying to write the stuff for 2015, 2016. So they're still writing that part of the law, and that's why we don't have any of that information. But the biggest impact that they said as far as for two things is, one, actually it's an advantage for the retirees, because the private people offering, and not just the exchange, but the private people like Marshfield and Aspirus and all these people offering, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, their rates are very competitive with the exchange, and a lot of times lower, because they offer more tailored options for that retirees to their need. And then the advantage to the school district is, the biggest advantage is that you have the retirees off your plan, which typically the retirees use the plan more, and that cost then lowers your overall plan cost and your increases for your insurance plan for your active employees. So
there are a lot of variations on a theme with this, with an HRA concept. You could turn over the ability for the employee to decide where the money went into for investment purposes, so that they could grow their own pot of money. Maybe after, maybe I'm 22 when I come in 15 years is the magic number. I hit 15, so I'm 37. And I know that for each of those years you've been putting money in, and at 15 years, maybe you turn over the ability to me to be able to, tell the HRA how I want the money invested, which pieces I want it going to, and I mean, it's risk then with my own, the dollars that you've put in there for me. But there's all kinds of, little variations, but if in general the concept is an agreeable one, we would continue to pursue it.
I guess I would be interested in seeing this fleshed out more and getting more details, and seeing, it would be nice to see if we could get some quotes, what these folks would be looking at, for premiums. I understand it'd be a range, but at least to have an idea if it's something that's going to be affordable. And that's a hard time when you're retired. You have your pension, your other investments, but your ability to earn is greatly diminished. So, you'd like to keep it as much affordable as possible. I mean, if there's something there where we could see some numbers to see what would their dollars get them today. I mean, if they had X amount of money per month, what would there be affordable
What
plans?
kind of plans would be out there?
One of the things that I would encourage is, in any health plan, is not to go when you don't have to go. Once you get there, and I've been dealing with something the last month or two where they take a CT scan and they find all kinds of things that could be dangerous. And then you're kind of thrown into this situation, well, if 5 years down the road you didn't do anything about this, wouldn't you feel sorry that you didn't? So I think we can be wiser consumers of our healthcare dollars, and it should never get the impression that it's free, just go, just go and let them decide what to do. I think you have to ask good questions, and you have to spend your money well, and anything that would encourage that, I think would be good. I don't know if this would or not.
I think in some ways it might simplify some things. I mean, if people were, I understand now if you retire and move out of the area, it's treated as in-network. But that complicates things from the administrative end, because you're dealing with many different facilities and how that's all built. Where, I mean, people have their own and they move about and they deal with it where they're at. So it probably would simplify things for the administration, I would think, a great deal.
alternatives?
Yeah.
There are none.
Well, I think we will need, again, you can suggest that you want to continue what we've been doing and, you know, leave it as status quo. You can certainly make that decision. It will come to a point though where we're not saving dollars and then you'll have to make a change.
Well,
And
my early
can we
comment,
sustain it?
Is this gonna attract people to our shores?
We could set up a really fantastic plan and 2 years from now, it won't exist. Because you just don't know. But to me, you want to do, to me, you know, when Act 10 first came along, my comment to you was, I think you do things because we have to. You make some changes because you have to, not because you can. Because we saw certain boards in certain school districts, wherever they may be across the state, you know, just slashing things because they could suddenly. And you've been a very careful board to do things as we've needed to. And I just think that if we can do something that we can maintain a fairness to staff and, you know, to retain and attract, that there is a benefit here. Not only is it a good place to work, but, you know, we also try to give you a benefit once you're finished.
I would make a motion to proceed then with the
Investigating this concept.
investigation.
Okay, we have a motion second to proceed with the investigation of insurance concepts presented tonight. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we can move on to the updates and reports on the Boys and Girls Club use of the pitch facility. See Mr. Weefel's here.
He is here.
Yeah, no, you can take it.
Look at him go.
John, tell me who seconded that motion.
There.
Maybe we will. Thanks, Scott. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you for letting me come and speak to you tonight. I just wanted to give you an update, share positive, good news, because that's always good to
You just
hear.
shoo our representative right out.
He has work to do. I wanted to say thank you tonight and start by saying thank you for taking a chance on the Boys and Girls Club in regards to the pitch school facility that had been closed for 3 years, and you opened up to our idea of the concept of repurposing the facility as a Boys and Girls Club in service to the community. And I guess just a few notes that I wanted to share with you in regards to the result of that happening, and there have been some tremendous ones in a very short period of time. I have a few things that I jotted down that I wanted to share. In August of 2013, we began the transition of moving into the pitch facility, and for that 5-year lease that we agreed upon. And on Tuesday, September 3rd, I believe it was, we opened the doors to both a new morning program and our after-school program on the very first day of school. There were 9 students that attended the morning program that day, and 55 in the after-school, and about 17 in our teen center that we established in the old library area. And since that first day of school, we've experienced tremendous growth. Our average daily attendance has grown by over 60% since September. There are 70 students enrolled in our morning program with an average daily attendance of anywhere between 30 to 40. Our afternoon average has grown from about 79 to up over 90 students per day at pitch. So we've seen a tremendous volume shift of numbers of students that come to that facility. One, because of a lot of the program changes and things that we've added because of the facility. It's allowed us to serve more children with after-school programs. It allows us for doing age-appropriate activities and greater alignment with school day learning. We have 56 children enrolled in our CLC program that involve personal learning plans with input from teachers, parents, students, and staff professionals that we call intervention specialists. They interact with the kids both during the day and then after school with additional support. The facility has also allowed us to partner with other community programs like the YMCA. We use the pitch center this winter to host 5th grade basketball games, and we also had the opportunity to field our very first Boys and Girls Club teams for some kids who had never been involved in an organized sport before. We had a 3rd grade team and a 5th grade team, and this spring we'll also be hosting a job fair in the Pitch Center gym in collaboration with Macmillan Library and Encourage Community Foundation, the Job Center, and the local Chamber of Commerce. One of the major improvements we made to Pitch in 2013 was an integrated wireless package that was provided in full through the generosity of Solaris. the 1 gigabyte of wireless speed as compared to most homes or businesses that might have 20 to 100 megs of speed will allow us to make any room in the facility a computer lab and expand the use of future technology as we can add it. The first edition that we made were 20 new iPads that we were able to get through a couple of technology grants. And so it's really opened up some neat doors of educational software that we've been able to provide through interactive games and outcome-based initiatives that we've added. One of the challenges that we're facing moving forward with Pitch is air conditioning. The north-south corridor has air conditioning and runs very efficiently and works very well. We got to experience some of it in September when it got hot. But the east-west corridor does not have air conditioning in the classrooms. And of course, given the experience that we've had at Meade Elementary School with Boys and Girls Club activities in the summer, we do know that we see a tremendous drop in attendance when facilities aren't air conditioned. You know, kids want to be comfortable while they're having fun. So we have talked over an idea or a plan to take a look at some of those classrooms to see if there might be an opportunity to get them air conditioned. After working with Ed Allison and getting his insight, we have talked to a firm called Frederickson Engineering, and we have engaged them to do a study on the facility. They were involved with some facility improvements there a while back, and it's somebody that Ed felt comfortable that he could advise us to use. They are taking a look at the classrooms and seeing what it would take to use condensing units to just air condition the classrooms that we would use during the summer period. So there are about 5 rooms we'd want to get done, hopefully, if the funding was there, but we need to study it first. We need the engineering plans before we can decide to do that. So I guess I wanted to give you an update today, say thanks, let you know what's going on, and make sure that you were okay that we proceed forward with plans and with looking at engineering designs to find out if there's an opportunity for us to do some additional improvements.
You're doing the additional improvements.
Sure.
Wonderful.
Now, unless we can talk Mr. Crew into some extra funding.
He's still there.
Still there? Am I in line? Do I have to be in line? No, we would be doing the study to see what the cost would be. General analysis on a preliminary scale, and this is very preliminary. If we went with some type of condensing system that fit all the criteria that the schools would have to fit as a school facility, and discussion with Ed, we'd probably be looking somewhere in the neighborhood of about $5,000 per room. Overall concept, maybe to get all those rooms done, somewhere between $60,000 or more. Depends on when, the contractors, funding, so to speak, but we would raise the funds to do that as an organization, and that would not be on the school. We obviously understand that while we're in the lease position with the school district, that should we do a capital improvement of that nature, we would be giving that up should we walk away or step away from the facility as a purchase. But I guess I don't see that happening. But we understand that that's one of the things that could occur. But the desire to make it the best environment possible for the kids that are coming to the Boys and Girls Club is kind of what's the underlying cause of why we're pursuing it in the first place. And so we leave it up to you to decide whether or not we can move forward if the time is right and if we bring the proper plans in that you will approve of.
So he would just need a motion from you to approve a study by this engineering group?
I would make a motion to approve the engineering study to install air conditioning at the Pitch facility.
Second.
Okay, motion is,
Can I have one?
go ahead, John.
And make sure it's in conjunction with our building, Ed and our building and grounds group.
Yeah, he has my full blessing. This has actually been a really good partnership.
Yep.
So far, and Ron's kept me informed. Too informed.
We call that a lot.
I mean, it hasn't been without problems, but it's actually, the transition's gone a lot smoother than I had anticipated. We took a building that was mothballed for 3 years and is fully functional, and it's good to see kids back in there again.
Yeah.
It's being used, you know. And from a taxpayer standpoint, they're paying all the maintenance on the building now. So it's a savings to the district too. So it's the old cliche, the win-win situation.
You don't always get those, but we'll take this one. We're happy for it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the engineering study to install air conditioning at the Pitch facility. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And you would bring the results then back to the board?
Yes.
Or have that too?
Yep, probably what I would do is the next step would be to get the actual engineering schematics, go over those designs and plans with Ed, and make sure that we were all on the same page in terms of making sure everything fit the way it's supposed to in the facility makeup, for the future use in terms of it still being a school facility. And then we would take proposals and bids, go out and find the proper pricing. And there are a couple of different options, and we're going to explore them and see what's most beneficial and most affordable. And then we'd have to do the funding, raising of the funds to make it happen. It's certainly not within our normal budget, so it would be outside of our budget to raise this as a special project.
Now, Rob and I have had conversation about holding a board meeting there, but I think instead, we've talked about that can be confusing sometimes, so would you be interested, like we've done with our house that we built?
Yes.
Would you like to meet there sometime?
Yes.
And you'd be
Absolutely.
happy to give us a tour?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll be in touch.
We would love to have you come. Are there any questions about?
I just had a question for you. What heating system is currently there? Are they the ventilator systems or are they?
There's classroom univents, hot water system.
So
They were new in 2007.
do those univents have the capacity to put air conditioning in?
No, they don't have cooling coils
They don't.
in them, so it'd either be a univent
Okay.
replacement or possibly adding cooling coils.
I didn't know if they had the coolants function in there already or not.
The engineer is checking into whether or not there's just a cooling piece that can be put in there, one removed, one put in, or if the entire univent would have to come out and be replaced. And that's what we don't know yet. But he's doing all those studies right now. So are there any other questions about the Boys and Girls Club or anything I can answer?
I just want to thank you for everything you've done. I've heard some positive things, and I just think it's a really good partnership, and you're reaching kids that, that's what we're all about. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And none of this would be even remotely possible, not the growth and certainly not the impact that we're having on the kids that are attending both the morning and the after-school program. To be at kind of this strange place of going from a 5,000 square foot facility to almost 23,000 square feet plus 7 acres of land. It just opens tremendous doors, not only for the Boys and Girls Club, but I think probably one of my favorite pieces is the collaborative pieces, working with the Y, working with other entities and other nonprofits in the area to provide opportunities that kind of cross over in the community. And there were a lot of people that we received comments from. We had literally, Mary, hundreds of people coming through the building during the basketball program this winter that were so grateful that it was reopened and that it was being put to good use. And certainly we're still working out some kinks with community partnerships that want to use the facility and trying to figure out good ways to do that in terms of our programming and then inviting others in. That's always kind of sticky, figuring out what we need first and then opening up what we have left available from the day. But there are real opportunities. There's soccer coming up. There's interest from football and rugby to use outdoor space. There's interest from a lot of others that want maybe access to come in and teach Boys and Girls Club kids, opportunities for dance and music. We have kids taking guitar lessons there after school, and there's a drumming program that the kids are doing, like a stomp program, and there are a variety of things going on with technology in terms of what our program committee and others have done in turning around the Boys and Girls Club programs during the day. So it's been a tremendous group effort, and certainly one that's been supported by the communities and area businesses alike. So certainly I'm glad that people are feeling positive about the club and its impact, but it certainly has been due to people seeing the potential, and you folks as well. And I thank you for that, because it's one that will certainly bless our community and our kids for years to come. So.
And I think the other point that always scared me about your other location was safety of the kids themselves, and the fact that there was no parking and the traffic, people coming off of 54 coming on Baker, they say 25, well, nobody goes 25.
They don't really go.
And just the overall safety of everything is probably far better too.
And we've done some improvements. We've talked about some things in regards to safety, and we've done a lot of enhancements. A lot of our safety protocol are following some of the similar school protocols that were already pre-designed, and Colleen gave us the advantage of giving us some insight into some things that helped us kind of along that way. So that's been a tremendous, that's like That's a really number one on the table right now with Boys and Girls Club of America across the board is safety. And so we've got a facility that allows us to think in terms of that, both inside and outside. So it's a great facility to have. So thank you very much for your investment in the club. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the update.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay, and that concludes our new business. Just wanted to note, if we look ahead on our calendar, our next committee meeting night will be March 31st. We moved the meetings up 1 week due to spring break in April. So make sure that's noted on your calendars. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.